Hello Admirals and welcome back to my channel where I talk to you about Battlefleet Gothic, the space fleet game based in the Warhammer 40,000 universe. In this video I am going to talk to you all about hit and run attacks, what they are, who does them, what it means, and how they interact with a couple of different ships, and a few of the FAQs associated with that. So hit and run attacks are a form of shutting down your opponent's ships. They cause critical hits on those ships. So what does that mean? And how does that all kind of play tactically? So let's just go through the hit and run rules and have a think on that. So first of all, what are hit and run attacks? And this is a select force of fighters that are dispatched from the various ships to attempt to target specific locations on their enemy ship. Now you do roll for that, but I'll explain that in a little bit. And the aim of it is to do a critical hit on the actual enemy ship to do some serious damage to it and kind of leave it kind of damaged, like their weapons or their thrusters and engines and things like that. And hit and run attacks are made using assault craft or torpedoes, or by using teleport attacks, which I always forget to do, I'll be perfectly honest. So Ordinance, like the boarding torpedoes and assault boats. So for example, assault boats can be put on this Emperor class. This ship was painted by my mate BFG Noob, by the way. But they can be put on that. And the same with boarding torpedoes, they can be put on ships with with torpedo capacity, like this Gothic, for example. And they can be sent out during the Ordinance phase. And when they come into contact with the enemy, that's when they can do the hit and run attacks, essentially. And that's pretty much all there is to that. But you do need to check whether ships can actually take them. Now, the interesting with boarding torpedoes is that they can actually make one 45-degree turn. So that's not the same as like regular torpedoes that most fleets enjoy, except for Tau. So it can make that turn, which is quite critical and a good little tactical edge you have to using boarding torpedoes. So there is one other type of sort of main hit and run attack that you can do, which is teleport attacks, which I always forget to do, always, because it's in the end phase and I just generally forget. But it's kind of, teleport attacks are really useful for fleets that like to get in close, because to be able to complete a teleport attack, you need to be within 10 centimeters, and you also need to have the enemy shields down. Critically, escorts can't do teleport attacks. They don't have enough manpower to be able to teleport people aboard and do some critical attacks. A ship also can't make a teleport attack against a target that has more current hits than itself either. And it can only make one teleport attack per turn. So if these were completely healthy, even if these shields were down, this ship... this cruiser has 8 hit points compared to the strike cruiser's 6, so they wouldn't be able to do a teleport attack. But if it was damaged and it was down to 5, then it could. So you just got to be wary of that, and that's the complexity that I sometimes forget, to be perfectly honest. Now, one thing with teleport attacks, which is quite interesting, is that if your ship is on lock-on or reload ordnance orders, it can still do a teleport attack if it meets the other criteria. Any other order, it can't, but it can do that on those lock-on or reload ordnance orders. So if your Emperor's on reload ordnance, it can still do a teleport attack, for example. Now I've got a lovely Nurgle cruiser here that sometimes will have a mark of Nurgle on it, which prevents boarding and that sort of thing, but it does not prevent a teleport attack. So things like that typically preclude boarding, like this Nurgle or other sort of Tyranid stuff and things like that, they don't automatically protect you against teleport attacks, and they can be hit by teleport attacks. They are slightly different. So critically, how do hit and run attacks actually work? So to resolve hit and run attacks, you simply roll a d6, and on a score of 1, the attack fails. On a score of 2 or more, then you look up the actual critical hit on the critical hits table, and you do that immediately. The critical damage that you may cause can be repaired. Some of them are cumulative, like fire, and some of them are not cumulative, like thrusters. You can't stack up damage to speed and things like that, right? Escorts are automatically damaged, or killed, I should say, if a critical hit goes through. So that's how you resolve it. But let's do it in action. But you still need to roll all the relevant stuff for Ordnance as well. So, for example, I've got an Emperor. I've paid for Shark assault boats. I've decided to put 4 assault boats into this Nurgle Carnage Cruiser. Now, the Carnage Cruiser does have an opportunity with its turrets to try and shoot some of these down on a 4, 5, or 6. And it shoots one of them down. Now, I won't go into resilient aircraft, that's a topic for another video, but it shoots one of them down, which means that 3 go through. So now I'm going to roll 3 dice. And I rolled a 2, a 3, and a 3. Right? Straightforward. So what does this dice roll mean? So you take these numbers and you check it on the critical hits table. So on a 2, it's a dorsal armor damage, and I got 2 3s, a starboard and starboard. There's your critical hits. So these go away, and this ship now hasn't got any starboard guns, and it doesn't have any dorsal guns anymore. So they can't use those. Now in the end phase, they can attempt to repair these depending upon the number of hit points it has left. So for example, say it had 5 hit points left, you'd roll 5 dice, and on a roll of the 6, I didn't get any. They're still damaged and won't be able to use any of those weapons as part of the next phase. Now I would note that if any of those are got through, like I said, escorts will be killed on a roll. But critically, they changed the rules on escorts, and so now it's not a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You need to roll a 4+ to kill that escort. So I actually only rolled a 2, 3, and 2 3s. So they would have survived in that instance. Now there are some fleets, like Space Marines, that get a +1 to those dice rolls for hit and run attacks. So what does that actually mean? Well, it means they can't actually fail a hit and run attack if their Ordnance, boarding torpedoes, or their Thunderhawks in this instance acts as both. If that gets through, then they automatically hit, and they would roll. Say I got 3 through Thunderhawks, so they would roll to see what they got. So none of them would fail. This would go up to a 3, this would go up to a 4, and this would go up to a 5 because they add a +1 to their attacks. Now, that still works for escorts as well. So if they put their Thunderhawks into this ship, usually, for example, the Chaos or Imperial fleets would need to roll a 4+ to kill this off. Because of their +1, they only need a 3+. So we're in the end phase, and we can do now, within 10 centimeters, this ship has lost its shields, so we can do a teleport attack now, and it is 1 attack, essentially. And you just roll the 1d6. That is it. On a roll of 1, it fails. Okay, so you get a 3, and you check it on the table again. And that would be another starboard. This poor ship's getting hammered on its right side, isn't it? Poor thing. So while I've shown you some assault boats, I want to show you torpedoes because they are slightly different to assault boats. So when you have got boarding torpedoes on a particular ship, you have to select whether you're using regular torpedoes or boarding torpedoes. You can't mix and match like you can, like with an Emperor, for example, putting out 4 assault boats and 4 bombers in separate waves, but you can kind of do that. With torpedoes, you can't. Now, they do operate in a very similar way, but they are different to these in that, so for example, if you send out your torpedoes and you hit here, you would roll, for example, to see if it blew up, which they don't, and then the ship would use their turrets like usual to try and shoot them down, which they don't shoot any down. So then you have a wave of 6 torpedoes. Now the difference is these torpedoes still have to hit against the armor before you can roll for the hit and run attacks. So you'd get 6 dice to try and hit first, and I got 2. And then those 2 are the ones that I would roll. So don't roll a 1. I rolled a 1, but then I would compare that against the hit and run attack critical hits table, and that's what I would roll. So in this instance, it would be the dorsal. So tactically, why would you use the hit and run attacks like boarding torpedoes and shark assault boats or Thunderhawks or things like that over just using regular torpedoes to do damage or regular bombers to do damage, etc. And the critical thing with it is hit and run attacks do critical damage, shutting down your opponent's ability to do things back to you. So the ability for them then suddenly not to be able to fire at you for multiple turns, because the only way they get any of these systems back is by repairing them, and they need to roll 6s. So if you're doing, like I did with that torpedo salvo, to be able to do anything, they've got to roll 3 6s to get all those weapons back online. Earlier on with the 2 starboards and the dorsal damage, they again need to roll 3 6s to get any of them back, and they need to pick those. So if they only roll 1 6, then they need to pick one system to bring back online. So you're tactically shutting their ability down. So, for example, if you can shut down the opposing carrier force, removing their ordnance abilities, so then suddenly you have ordnance superiority. If you can prevent a predominantly gunboat heavy Chaos Fleet, for example, being able to fire at you, then it blunts their ability to really do any damage to you, and you are in control. Thunderhawks are notoriously dangerous within the Space Marine fleet, and I highly recommend using them in their mass numbers, quite frankly, because they can completely shut down a fleet. I've had multiple games where using 4, 5, 6 strike cruisers, all with Thunderhawks on, and shots are never fired back at me. And suddenly you're on the front foot. You are able to dictate the ability, because they can't shoot back at you anymore, so you can maneuver where you want, and maybe they'll get 1 or 2 systems back. The likelihood is they're not going to get them back every turn, and you are then subsequently following up with more assault boats and more boarding torpedoes, and you get to put your position to fire maximum firing of your own weapons batteries and lances and bombardment cannons and acid batteries, etc., or railguns. So it's really about I think that the ability to be able to use hit and runs tactics like boarding torpedoes and especially assault boats can really add a tactical edge to your gameplay, because it can really shut down your enemy, and their game plan is completely out the window, and you can continue to maintain yours. So if you can do that, then you're going to be winning most of your games, quite frankly. They can't win a game if they can't fire at you and do damage to you, right? So really consider using them more than what I see, to be perfectly honest. Boarding torpedoes come out rarely, it's quite surprising how few do that. Teleport attacks, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I always forget to use them, and it's a kind of a free attack, right? But I would say really useful for fleets that really want to get in and kind of get in your face sort of thing. So orcs and Tyranids and Chaos, who really want to get in and amongst and fire their big cannons and board and things like that. That's a useful spot, because suddenly if you've got 3 or 4 kill cruisers, for example, floating around a ship, and suddenly you could put 3 or 4, maybe you haven't been able to knock down them too heavily, but suddenly, and you haven't been able to board for whatever reason, suddenly being able to do 3 or 4 teleport attacks to cripple that ship from a critical hits perspective, and they can't do anything next turn, really puts you in a really strong position the following turn to turn around with things like heavy guns or potentially boarding. So really consider that teleport attack. Don't be like me and forget about it. Try and use it as best you can. It is only 1 attack, but you never know. You never know. So there you have it, Admirals. Hit and run attacks. A real good tactical way of shutting down your opponent's ability to be able to fight you back. They doesn't necessarily always do damage. One of them does, but the aim is to be able to shut down the main threats of the opponent and to follow up with your own main threats. So certain fleets do this really well. Space Marines do it well with the Thunderhawks. Dark Eldar do it really well with their Impalers and things like that. They get added bonuses with theirs as well, which is great. But don't ignore them in fleets like Orcs and Chaos and Imperials. They have access to those sorts of really, good rounded on a lot of their ships. So really useful to try and throw that in as a tactical advantage. Because if someone can't fire at you, you're probably going to win the game, right? Anyway, that's hit and run attacks, Admirals. If you like the video, like, subscribe, all that jazz, and if you've got any questions, put them in the comments. What are some of your Favorite have you done any hit and run attacks? What any of your favorite moments? Personally, I absolutely loved it when I used some Thunderhawks to completely shut down a Chaos battleship, a Desolator. Couldn't fire its lances at me anymore, and it was wonderful because lances terrify me when you're playing Space Marines. Not anymore if they can't fire at you, right? So what are some of your experiences? Any of your tactical thoughts? Leave a comment in the chat. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.